After my father died, I found a box of his old cassette tapes. He said they were memories for me. At first, I thought I was just hearing his stories, until I heard my own voice on one of them, recorded decades ago. Since then, every tape sounds closer, like something is whispering through the noise. And now I understand why he begged me not to finish listening. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the Bed. It happened in late October, 2 weeks after my father's funeral. I was back in my hometown, in the small, fog-wrapped village where I grew up. The house stood at the end of a narrow dirt road, surrounded by pines that whispered even when there was no wind. My father had lived there alone for the last 10 years, after Mom passed away. He never wanted to move, and I never understood why. Until I came back. The house smelled of dust and time. Every floorboard creaked like it was remembering something. I was there to clean things out, to sort what to keep, what to sell, what to throw away. I moved from room to room in silence, the sound of my shoes echoing through memories I didn't want to revisit. On the kitchen table, I found a note in his handwriting: "Don't forget the attic." The attic ladder was stiff and cold. As I pulled it down, a faint smell of old wood and iron filled the air. I climbed up with a flashlight, expecting boxes of old clothes and tools. Instead, right in the center of the attic floor, there was one box, wooden, heavy, with my name burned into the lid, Leo. The edges were worn smooth, as if he had touched them many times. On top, written in faded marker, were the words, "Don't listen all at once." I hesitated. My father had never been the type for riddles. I opened the box slowly. Inside were 24 audio cassettes, each labeled by year, 1983, 1984, 1985, up to 1997. Underneath them was an old silver tape player, the same model I used as a kid. A note was taped to it: "Start from the beginning." I sat on the dusty floor, the flashlight flickering weakly against the beams. The first cassette, 1983, clicked into place. I pressed play. For a few seconds, only static. Then, my father's voice, warm, younger, steady. "If you're listening, Leo, I guess I'm gone. These are memories. For you." He talked about his first job, about the day I was born, about how proud he was to hear me laugh for the first time. His voice made me feel like a child again, sitting beside him on summer evenings when we used to listen to old jazz records. Then, something changed. A faint tapping sound echoed behind his words, like someone knocking softly on a wall. The tape hissed. My father's tone shifted, just slightly. "If you hear noises while listening, don't worry. That's how it starts." My heart skipped. He laughed nervously in the recording, as if to dismiss it, but the tapping grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate. I paused the tape and looked around. The attic was empty, but the air felt heavier, charged. When I pressed play again, the voice on the tape was whispering, "Don't listen further, if you're alone in the house." The cassette clicked. Then silence. The player stopped on its own, even though the tape hadn't reached the end. I tried to eject it, it was jammed. I could hear faint breathing from the speaker, like someone was waiting for me to respond. My flashlight dimmed until I was left in near darkness. I turned it off and stood. Below me, the house groaned as if something had shifted inside it. A door slammed somewhere downstairs, even though every window was closed. I froze on the ladder, listening. My father's old clock started ticking again. It hadn't worked in years. I left the attic light on and went down, but the entire house seemed to hum softly, like it was filled with low static. I unplugged the tape player, yet the faint whisper continued, not from the machine, but from somewhere deep within the walls. I could barely make out words. My name. I told myself I was tired, that grief was twisting my mind. But when I looked back toward the attic door, I saw the ladder still down, and at the top, just for a second, a shadow moved across the light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the same tapping, the same slow rhythm, somewhere above me. And even though the power was out, I could still see the small red light of the tape recorder glowing faintly through the attic boards. The next morning, I decided I had to know what was on the rest of the tapes. The following evening, rain was falling in slow, steady lines against the old windows. The air in the house felt heavier, colder than it should have been. Every time I walked past the attic door, I could swear I heard a low hum coming from above, the faint, mechanical sound of the cassette player still turning. I had unplugged it the night before. Or at least, I thought I had. I told myself it was grief and exhaustion. I hadn't slept properly in days. But the note on the box kept replaying in my mind, "Don't listen all at once." Maybe that meant something. Maybe it was a warning. Or maybe my father just didn't want me to rush through his memories. Either way, curiosity won. I went back up the ladder. The attic was colder than before. My breath came out in short, pale clouds. The box of tapes was where I left it, though the lid was now slightly open, as if someone had already been there. Inside, the cassette labeled 1984 was on top. I could have sworn it had been under another tape the night before. I took it out, brushed off the dust, and set it into the player. At first, the same warmth as before. My father's voice filled the attic, calm and familiar. "Leo, this was the year your mother and I took you to the lake. You were afraid of the water. You cried until I carried you in. And then, you laughed. You loved the sound of the ripples." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over me. But then, just like the previous tape, there was a shift. The background noise deepened, turning into the faint echo of wind and static. And then, something else. A whispering sound, almost too quiet to notice. I leaned closer to the speaker. "He's coming again, Dad," said a small, trembling voice. It took me a second to realize what I was hearing. It was me, my own voice, but as a child. The exact tone, the same slight stutter I used to have. My stomach tightened. "Stay where you are, Leo," my father's voice replied, tense now, nothing like before. "Don't go near the door." There was a scrape, like a chair moving, and then silence. My father sighed heavily. When he spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "If you ever find these tapes, son, and if you hear this part, it means he's close again." The tape crackled. Something hit the wall inside the recording, followed by 3 slow knocks. The exact same sound echoed in the attic, 3 dull thuds, coming from the far side near the beams. I froze. The player hissed, and through the static I thought I heard breathing, not from the machine, but behind me. I turned sharply, flashlight trembling in my hand. Nothing. Only dust floating in the air. I told myself it was the sound of the rain on the roof, tried to believe it. I hit stop on the player, but the tape didn't stop. My father's voice grew distorted, drawn out, as if the recorder was slowing down on its own. He remembers the sound, he follows the sound. I yanked the plug from the wall. The player died instantly. But even then, the tape reels kept turning a moment longer, as though powered by something else. I threw the cassette back into the box and shut the lid. When I climbed down from the attic, I locked the hatch. My hands were shaking. I went to the kitchen, turned on every light. Yet the house didn't feel brighter, only more hollow. Later that night, I tried to distract myself, sitting by the fireplace with a cup of coffee, the TV on for background noise. But when the volume dropped during a commercial, I heard it again, the faint, rhythmic knocking from above. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. I gathered my courage, climbed halfway up the attic ladder, and listened. It stopped the second I touched the hatch door. I stood there for a long time, my hand frozen on the handle. Then, from the other side, something whispered my name. Not my father's voice. Not mine. Something in between. I ran back down, heart pounding, and stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, when I went back to check, the ladder was already lowered, though I hadn't opened it. The box sat in the middle of the floor again, but this time the 1985 cassette was waiting on top, perfectly placed, as if someone wanted me to keep going. I should have left then. I should have burned them all. but part of me needed to know the truth, what my father had been trying to tell me. So I went back up, sat on the same cold floor, and reached for the next tape. It was still raining the next morning, a steady gray curtain that blurred the trees outside. The entire house felt damp, heavy with silence. I hadn't slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the tape, my father's voice, my own voice as a child, the knocking that had followed. I kept telling myself it was a coincidence, an echo from the storm, maybe an old pipe expanding with the cold. But deep down, I didn't believe that. By noon, I couldn't resist anymore. The third cassette, 1985, waited exactly where I had left it, sitting on top of the closed box. I stared at it for a long time, then finally carried it downstairs. I didn't want to listen in the attic again. I needed light, space, a place that didn't feel like it was holding its breath. I set the tape player on the kitchen table, beside the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, but fog rolled in from the fields, wrapping the house in pale gray. I pressed play. My father's voice came through weaker this time, almost trembling. "Leo, if you're still listening, it means you've gone too far." The background noise wasn't static anymore. It was breathing, slow, ragged, close to the microphone. Then a faint scrape, like something dragging across wood. "It's getting stronger," my father whispered. I thought I could contain it, but it doesn't stay buried. It listens. It waits for the sound of its own name. He paused. There was movement, then the distinct creak of a floorboard. "If you ever hear it again, check under the living room floor. Don't open it at night. Promise me that, Leo." The tape hissed, then cut to silence. I stared at the player, waiting for more, but the reels had stopped. My heart began to race. I turned toward the living room, the words echoing in my head. "Under the floor." I knelt down by the carpet, the one my father had never replaced. The wood beneath felt uneven. I pushed it aside and found a small metal ring built into the floorboards, a hidden latch. It took effort, but I managed to pull it open. Beneath was a narrow wooden staircase leading into darkness. The smell hit first, old earth, mold, and something metallic, like rust or dry blood. I grabbed a flashlight and descended slowly. The air grew colder with every step. The space below wasn't a basement. It was smaller, almost like a hidden shelter, stone walls, a dirt floor, and shelves stacked with dusty boxes. In the corner stood an old cassette deck, identical to the one upstairs. On the wall behind it, faint marks, scratches forming shapes, maybe letters, impossible to read. A single red cassette lay on the table next to the player. It had no label. I hesitated, then pressed play. My father's voice was there again, but quieter, more desperate. "If you're hearing this, I didn't stop it. I thought I could lock it down here, but it moves through the recordings. Through the sound." I could hear movement behind his voice, footsteps, a dragging noise, and then something else, a whisper overlapping his words, almost mimicking him. "Don't trust your own voice," he said quickly. "If you hear yourself, don't answer." The tape crackled violently. For a moment, it sounded like two versions of my father were speaking at once, one calm, one pleading. Then came another sound, someone knocking from inside the recorder. 3 slow knocks. I stepped back, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The air in the room changed. It felt charged, electric, as if something invisible was standing right beside me. I turned toward the staircase, ready to leave, but the steps behind me creaked. I froze. From the darkness, a voice spoke, low, almost familiar. "Leo, stop listening." It was my voice. My own tone, my breath, but deeper, as if it came from an older version of me. I felt my chest tighten. The flashlight flickered, then went out completely. In the dark, the tape player started to rewind on its own. I heard the same line again, this time whispered directly beside my ear. "I told you not to listen." I ran. I stumbled up the stairs, slammed the hatch shut, and pushed the carpet back over it. The house was dead silent again, except for my breathing. I unplugged the player, threw the red cassette back into the box, and locked the attic door with a chair. That night, I didn't move from the couch. Every light stayed on. But sometime past midnight, I heard faint sounds coming from beneath the floor, the gentle whir of a tape turning. And then, my own voice again, echoing softly from below. "You shouldn't have opened the door, Leo." The next day began without sunlight. The fog hadn't lifted overnight, it had thickened, wrapping the entire property in a dull white haze. The air smelled of wet leaves and dust. I hadn't slept again. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tape rewinding on its own, the scrape of wood under the floor, my own voice repeating that one line, "You shouldn't have opened the door, Leo." By morning, I decided I was done. I was going to leave the house, lock the tapes inside, and never come back. I packed my things in silence, glancing at the attic door every few minutes. But just as I reached for my car keys, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the table, beside my bag, lay another cassette, one I hadn't touched. It was labeled in my father's handwriting, "Last." I froze. I hadn't seen that tape before. The ink was fresh, not faded like the others. It looked new. My first thought was impossible, someone had placed it there during the night. But who? I had locked every door. Every window. I didn't want to play it. I really didn't. But leaving without knowing what was on it felt worse. If this was the message my father had meant me to find, then I needed to hear it before I walked away for good. I told myself it would give me peace. It was a lie, but I pressed play anyway. For several seconds, only static. Then his voice, quieter than ever. "Leo, you shouldn't be there anymore." He sounded terrified. In the background, something was moving, slow footsteps, scraping along the floor. It found its way through the tapes. Through sound. Every recording keeps a part of it alive. There was a long pause. I heard him breathing hard, whispering as if someone was standing right behind him. It listens for names, for memory. Once you recognize it, it knows you. Then a sudden distortion, metallic shrieks, the kind of tape makes when it's about to tear. Through the noise, another voice emerged, whispering over my father's words. A voice that sounded exactly like mine. "Don't turn it off." I slammed the stop button, heart racing. But the tape didn't stop. The reels spun faster, the speaker hissed, and every light in the house flickered. My reflection in the window wasn't moving with me anymore, it stood perfectly still, its mouth forming words I couldn't hear. Then, every cassette in the box began to play on its own. The sounds layered together, my father's voice, my mother's laughter, my own voice as a child, until it became one long, endless whisper that filled the entire room. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it, not through sound, but through my chest, vibrating under my skin. The television turned on by itself. The screen showed nothing but black and white static. In it, for a brief second, I saw my father sitting at the kitchen table, just as I was now, staring into the camera. His mouth moved silently, as if he was trying to warn me. Then he looked up, straight at me, and the screen went dark. I ripped the tape from the player, threw it to the floor, and backed away. But the whispering didn't stop. It was coming from behind me now, from the direction of the window. When I turned, I froze. Outside, standing just beyond the fog, was a figure. A man. He was about my height, my build, wearing the same jacket I had on. Even through the mist, I could make out his face. It was mine, paler, older, expressionless. He tilted his head, slowly, like he was studying me. I stumbled backward, knocking over the box of tapes. They scattered across the floor. Every cassette started spinning, though none of them were in a player. The sound grew unbearable, a low hum that vibrated through the walls, shaking the frames, the dishes, the floor beneath me. The power went out. Everything fell silent. When the lights came back seconds later, the figure outside was gone. The fog had swallowed him. On the table, the tape labeled "Last" had rewound itself to the beginning. I stared at it, unable to breathe. The final seconds of the recording played by themselves. My father's voice, faint, fading. "If you see him, it means I failed. Don't let him in, Leo." Then, almost overlapping, another whisper followed, my voice again, calm, certain. "It's too late. You already did." I turned off the recorder and backed out of the room. I didn't pack. I didn't think. I just walked out into the fog, clutching my car keys, trying not to look back at the house. But as I reached the end of the driveway, I heard it again from the open window behind me. The tape had started playing once more. This time, it wasn't my father's voice. It was mine, clear and steady. "You can't leave yet, Leo. There's one more tape." The morning came without sound. No wind, no birds, not even the hum of the refrigerator. The world outside my window looked drained of color. The fog had turned thick and white, pressing against the glass like something alive. I hadn't moved from the couch all night. The last words from the tape still echoed in my mind. "You can't leave yet, Leo. There's one more tape." I told myself it was over. I'd burned every cassette but one, the one labeled last. I had taken them outside at dawn, poured gasoline over the box, and watched the fire consume them. But the smell of melting plastic hadn't brought relief. As the flames died, I heard it again, faint, from inside the house, the sound of a tape clicking into place. I went back inside. On the kitchen table, next to the melted tape recorder, sat a new cassette. It was unmarked, clean, as if untouched by age or dust. I didn't want to touch it. But when I looked closer, I realized my name had been written on its side, Leo, in my father's handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was cold, almost wet. I took the old backup player from the shelf, the one my father used for music, and slid the tape in. The reels began to turn on their own before I even pressed play. My father's voice came through, quiet and tired. "If you're hearing this, Leo, then you already let it in." His breathing was rough, like he'd been crying or running. "It copies sound, memory, even breath. It's not in the house, it is the house. I thought I could trap it in the recordings. I was wrong. Every time I spoke into the microphone, I gave it away back." He stopped, and the sound of a chair scraping echoed faintly. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "When you listen, it listens too. That's how it finds a new voice to live through. I'm sorry, son. It'll be you next." The tape hissed, and then I heard something that froze my blood. My own voice. Not recorded from childhood, current, alive. "Dad, stop. Please stop." But I hadn't spoken. My mouth hadn't moved. I stood motionless as the recording continued in my tone, calm, controlled. "He's gone now, Dad. I understand what to do." Then my father's voice again, panicked. "Leo, don't say that. Don't answer it." A loud crash on the tape, something falling, shattering, followed by a long, metallic screech. The recording went silent except for faint breathing. Then, softly, the same voice, mine, spoke once more. "It's okay. I'll take it from here." The player clicked off by itself. I sat in complete silence. My reflection in the dark window stared back at me, delayed by half a second. I reached out my hand. It didn't move. Then, the phone rang. It was the old landline, dusty and unused for years. I picked it up without thinking. On the other end, static, then a voice that sounded like my father. "Leo, are you still there?" Before I could answer, another voice came through the line, overlapping as identical to mine. "He's not. I'm here now." I dropped the phone. It kept ringing, over and over, though the receiver lay on the floor. Every bulb in the house began to flicker in rhythm with the sound. The air felt charged, like a storm was building inside the walls. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, steady, descending the attic ladder. I hadn't opened it. The door creaked, and someone stepped into the hallway. My flashlight caught a glimpse, my own figure standing in the shadows, same clothes, same face, but eyes completely black. He looked at me with a faint, hollow smile. "You finished listening, Leo. Now it's your turn to record." He raised his hand, holding a small tape recorder, the same model as mine. I stumbled backward toward the front door, but the knob was ice cold and wouldn't turn. Every wall in the house began to hum with that same low frequency from the tapes. I turned, and he was right behind me now. His mouth moved with my own words, but I couldn't hear my real voice anymore, only his, echoing through the house like 100 overlapping whispers. "Say something, Leo. The tape is rolling." The lights went out. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The fog outside was gone. The sun was rising. Everything looked peaceful, clean. The box of tapes was back in its place, perfectly arranged. In front of me, the recorder, still spinning. I pressed stop. My hands were steady. I didn't remember how I got there. I only remembered my father's last words, "It'll be you next." Outside, a car engine started. I walked to the window and saw a man stepping out, a neighbor I barely recognized. He was carrying a small package, glancing curiously at the house. Then he looked up and waved. I wanted to open the door, to tell him to leave, but my voice didn't come out. He knocked once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the house, deep and hollow. From somewhere nearby, a tape clicked. My voice came from the speaker, calm, friendly, familiar. "Come in. I was just recording something."